just because I wanted to. George of the Jungle. So George of the Jungle came out in 1994 and is one of my favorite comedies of all time, maybe even in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. And I watched this movie a lot as a kid. It was one of those movies that we just had on VHS, so I just kept popping that sucker in and watching it again and again and again. And I have nothing but good memories associated with this movie. The sequel, on the other hand, is a different story, but the original George of the Jungle film from 1994 with Brendan Fraser. I know it's Fraser if you're getting technical, but I've said Brendan Fraser my whole life and it's just in my mouth and it just feels right, so I'm gonna keep on saying it. That movie has a special place in my heart, and I watched it again and it's still just as good, if not better, than I remember, because this movie is just hilarious. It's a good time. It's self-aware when it needs to be. It's clever when it needs to be. It's heartfelt when it needs to be. It hits all the beats that you want in this type of movie, which is why it blows my mind that this movie is not talked about or remembered as fondly as I think it should be, because it's kind of this hidden gem. Nobody really talks about it, even in the wake of Brendan Fraser's Academy Award, and everyone's like, oh yeah, he was always a good actor. Look at The Mummy. Nobody mentions George of the Jungle, the movie that ultimately gave him his big break, that really pushed him into superstardom. It was George of the Jungle. But what is George of the Jungle, really? Well, it's a self-aware Tarzan parody that's based off of an old 60s animated series that was also a Tarzan parody that was made by the same people that did the Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons, I believe. So, you know, not the highest quality animation. They're pretty simple, pretty standard 60s cartoons. And this movie came out at a time when a lot of 60s cartoons were getting theatrical releases. The Flintstones movie is the one that comes to my mind first. And I think when this movie came out, people dismissed it as just that. Oh, it's just another remake of a 60s cartoon that just doesn't live up to what made the original great. But with this movie, you can tell that the filmmakers both have great respect for the source material, but also aren't afraid to push it a little bit further, bring it into the 90s, expand on what was there in the cartoon, but, you know, adapt it for feature length. And that sounds really easy, but it's actually a little bit harder than you might think. You really need a solid creative vision to pull that off, and this movie has that. Watching it again, I never realized just how self-aware this movie was. It breaks the fourth wall. The way the narrator kind of reassures us that, oh, don't worry, your hero isn't dead. Nobody's gonna die in this movie. It's a family film. But the narrator is not the only character that breaks the fourth wall. Different characters break the fourth wall at hilarious moments all the time, and you really get a sense that everybody was having just so much fun on set, riffing off of each other, looking directly at the camera, saying their lines, and watching it, you just can't help but have a good time right along with them. But what's the actual plot of this movie? Well, we have Ursula, played by Leslie Mann, and probably one of her earliest film roles. Maybe she did a couple of things before this, but I feel like this really was before the Leslie Mann that we know today. And she's trekking through the jungles of Africa, having the time of her life, until her fiance Lyle, played by Thomas Hayden Church, in what's hands down my favorite role of his. Sorry all the Spider-Man fans watching this that love him as Sandman. I like him as Sandman too, but personally Thomas Hayden Church will always be Lyle to me. That's the first movie I saw him in. He totally owns this role as this pompous, narcissistic, full of himself, out of touch jerk that doesn't like the jungle at all. He can't believe he's here. He's just miserable the whole time. And what I didn't really pick up on as a kid is that the majority of the humor involving Lyle in this first section of the movie happens at his expense from the porters, the native Africans, just making fun of him the whole time and how out of touch he is. And it gets really funny, especially the bad guy falls in poop joke. That made me laugh so hard as a kid, and it still makes me laugh now. I love it. Perfect fourth wall break, and is such a great way to make a poop joke actually funny, because, you know, poop jokes, fart jokes, scatological humor, that's kind of lowest common denominator humor. You usually don't find it all that funny when you're above the age of like 6. But here they turn a poop joke into a fourth wall break, also acknowledging the cliche of poop jokes in the joke. It just makes that joke work for the whole family, and may be my single favorite line in this movie. But since Lilo's having just a terrible time, he's taking Ursula off to see the apes so that they can get out of there quicker, and he's taking a shortcut that I mean, he's Lyle. He's out of touch. He doesn't know what a shortcut is. So, of course, trouble happens. They meet a lion. They need to be rescued. Lyle very bravely runs away and falls down and passes out. And now George has to rescue Ursula. And so here we have the classic, Tarzan meeting Jane scene. Wait, no. This movie's actually clever and original, so we don't really get that. Instead, we get a pretty short but very memorable wrestling match between George and the lion. And I mean pro wrestling, WWE style wrestling, and it just makes it all the more hilarious when you see these two go at it. And the effects actually hold up pretty well. Sometimes you can tell that maybe that was the animatronic lion, but for the most part, it looks real enough. But you might be thinking, now we're gonna get the classic Tarzan Jane introduction. But no, when Tarzan brings her back to the treehouse, she is still unconscious, and when she wakes up, she does not see George, she sees Ape, played by John Cleese. And John Cleese is just the perfect voice to have for this kind of role. It's a role that I'm sure he could do in his sleep at this point. But, back in 1994, he was still kind of a fresh voice. The sarcastic British wit of John Cleese's voice hadn't become a kind of film cliche yet. So I give this movie a pass, especially because the combination of John Cleese's voice and the ape animatronic suit works so well together, and they actually used Jim Henson's Creature Shop to do the ape animatronics. Those are some top-notch monkey effects, especially for the time period. I was actually a little surprised to find out Rick Baker wasn't involved at all, but I don't know, maybe he was off doing Congo or something. And Ursula's shock and surprise of seeing Abe talk in the John Cleese accent leads to one of the more interesting plot points of this movie, where Abe constantly has to pretend he's just a regular gorilla, that he can't talk while in the presence of Ursula, which, sometimes it's pretty funny, sometimes it's a little forced, so that's kind of half and half for me. But after much delay, when Ursula finally introduces herself to George and vice versa, the awkward yet adorable chemistry between these two actors just carry the rest of the movie for me. Apparently Leslie Mann and Brendan Fraser actually had a crush on each other when they were making this movie, but didn't tell each other and didn't act on it at all. And you can tell, you immediately get the connection between these two with very minimal dialogue. And the rest of the first act is just kind of introducing things and concepts that were in the show, and people want to see how it was adapted to live action. So we meet some of the other animals like Shep, George's big gray peanut-loving Poochie, and he's great. The CGI on him is getting a little dated, but for the most part he holds up pretty well. And the jokes that they do with him are equally funny. I just love the visual gag of an elephant that thinks he's a dog, so he acts like a dog, he plays fetch with a tree trunk, and it's that kind of oddball, don't take it too seriously sentiment that just permeates this whole movie, and it's what makes it fun to watch, because you don't have to think, oh, does that actually make sense? No, you're all wrapped up in the emotions and the joke, and they come pretty quick one after another, so if one joke kind of falls flat, you just move right on to the next one, and odds are that one is going to make you laugh. But you can't have a Tarzan parody without bringing the Jungle Man to the big city. That is a film Tarzan trope going all the way back to the days of Johnny Weissmuller at least. I mean, it's in the books, but visually, I think the Weissmuller movie where he's Tarzan in New York, I think that's what kind of set the template of, oh, Jungle Man coming to the big city. And while this movie does have some of those same cliches, where, oh, George doesn't understand civilization, he tries to apply jungle logic to civilized society, and it doesn't work, it's hilarious. While we've seen it before, it is still pretty funny, and it's really the actors and the writing that makes it fresh and unique. Brendan Fraser, I can't praise enough. He understood the assignment. He somehow got the perfect recipe of goofy faces, animal instincts, and let's just say it, sexiness. Yeah, I'm not above saying that George of the Jungle is an attractive dude, and he has to be for this joke with the horses to make any sense. But it's here in the San Francisco section where Ursula's mom kind of becomes the main antagonist for a bit. Lyle, at the end of the first act, he wound up in an African prison, so he's kind of out of the picture for a while. And to replace him, we get Ursula's mother, and she's also trying to split up Ursula and George. It's that classic Hallmark movie cliche. But here I think it works a little better because George is just some random dude from the jungle that she just met. So it's kind of like, yeah, what are your real intentions for calling off the engagement? And are you that taken with him? Is that the kind of person you want to marry, settle down with? Do you want to live in the jungle, or is he going to come here? These are valid questions. But this movie isn't interested in valid questions. This is a comedy, and the mother is cartoonishly over the top in the best way. And while she's hilarious, she's not as hilarious as Lyle. And I really wish Lyle would come back. Oh wait, he does come back at the end, because while this is going on back in Africa, the ape got captured by the poachers, so now George has to go back and rescue him. And if you've noticed, this plot is kind of a little all over the place. Well, that's because it's just the kind of movie it is. It's kind of light on plot and on structure, and if I were to really nitpick this movie apart, I would say it's kind of unbalanced. They try to juggle maybe one too many things. But for me, I don't know which section I would cut or change, because each section of this movie has moments and scenes that are just iconic and make me laugh. So I wouldn't really want to change it. It's just structurally, yeah, I can see how some people would be like, it's a little unbalanced. But when George does make it to the jungle and Ursula also returns, she realizes that she loves George, so she's gonna go get him. Lyle also returns in pretty inexplicable fashion. The narrator fills us in comedically rushed fashion that he got out of prison, that he joined a cult, became the leader of that cult, got ordained as a minister, so now he can officiate weddings. So with that newfound power, he whisks Ursula off alone. George has to fight these mercenaries that Lyle hired, and with the help of Teenage Mutant Ninja Gorillas, they fight off these mercenaries, get ape free, and now they gotta get Ursula back before Lyle can marry himself and her. And it's here in this climax where all the watch out for that tree jokes, which I'm just now realizing I haven't made a single watch out for that tree joke in this whole video. I think I deserve an award for that. But here George has to do the biggest swing in his life, go so fast that when he smacks into that tree, it topples over and he's able to rescue Ursula from the rapids. And based on that description, if you didn't know already that this movie was based off of a cartoon, yeah, this is your hint. But as goofy as it is, it's actually kind of epic when you see the build-up that George has to prepare himself for this swing and how important it is. And as he's going, you see the wind in his cheeks and his face distorting like he's going Mach 2 or something. And then the payoff of him just smacking face first into a tree as hard as humanly possible. That's just fun. And that's really the best word I can use to describe this movie. It's just fun. It's the kind of movie that you throw on if you've got kids, show it to them. Good for kids, good for adults. Well, it's not deep and profound and will actually get kids thinking about ideas in different ways, like some of the best animated films that we've gotten. It's just a good time, and I think maybe the reason why I'm reviewing this now is because I also just saw the Mario movie, because George of the Jungle, like Mario, is just fun. It's lighthearted, it's innocent, but it's got great acting, believable character interactions, character moments, and really good production design and music, now that I think about it. The music in George of the Jungle is awesome. The Johnny Clegg song Dela that plays when they're dancing around the fire and then comes in again a couple different times, but most importantly at their wedding. I've been listening to that song my whole life. It's on my Spotify playlist right now. But now I turn over to you guys. What do you think about George of the Jungle? Did you enjoy it as a kid? Do you enjoy it now? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content. And hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk. And I'll see you in the next video.